Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Aladdin, the bootleg version for the NES. Recently I did the officially released Aladdin title on NES based on the Sega Genesis game, and showcased just how bad that game was. But the interesting thing about this bootleg is that it is so well done in comparison to the actually released NES version of Aladdin. So here we go with Bootleg Aladdin for the NES. Now this version is actually based off the Capcom Super Nintendo version of Aladdin. One of my only gripes with the game is the way that momentum is handled. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to get certain jumps because Aladdin slows down, and if you come to a complete stop, if you immediately try to jump, you're going to have very little, if any, momentum behind your jumps, making it sometimes harder to make whatever jump you're trying to make. I've always enjoyed both versions of Aladdin, the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo version. And I feel that the Genesis one is better in many regards, but Capcom still did a stellar job with their SNES version. Most of the levels from the SNES version of the game are included in this bootleg version for NES, and as you can see, the graphics are quite colorful. Aladdin looks pretty well. There's a lot of frames of animation for Aladdin, whether it be him jumping on the enemies and being able to flip off of them, or being able to just climb up a ledge, landing on like a side of it and being able to pull himself up. There aren't that many times where a bootleg actually seems to have had effort put into it, but this is definitely one of those times. You can use apples to help you stun enemies from a distance, allowing us then to get in close and then jump off of their heads. Over here we're going to start climbing up a couple of platforms in a row as we make our way to the top, watching out for these arrow shooting guys. Like right here you can see that he's able to hit me every time as I'm trying to make my way up the platform. He's actually one of the most annoying enemies in the whole game, more so than bosses or a lot of the other trouble that we'll have to deal with, just because he's right there and he can sometimes be difficult to actually land a hit on. The next level we have some pits to deal with, so you have to be careful of them as we make it to the rooftops here in Agrabah. One of the things I like most about the official game and this bootleg is the speed that you're able to kind of get in a lot of portions of the game. You're able to kind of get Aladdin really going, being able to springboard off of guys' heads and just keep that whole flow going and not having to really stop all that much. As opposed to the Sega Genesis version, where Aladdin was a bit heavier, bigger on screen. You had some of the sword play and all, as well as just everything in the game was a little bit more methodical. You had to strategize a bit more in the Sega Genesis version, or at least I always felt that way. When you make it here, you have to go to kind of the edge of the platforms, and hopefully you're able to catch it after just a jump or two in order to climb up. Eventually you'll be able to get onto the clothesline up here, grab a hold of the sheet, and slide on all the way down. As soon as you get down though, make sure you immediately are ready for one of those arrow shooting guys, because he's waiting for you as you land. Go down one more of the lines, holding onto the cloth, and when you reach the bottom, we move on to the next part of the Agrabah level. Technically, this is all still part of one stage, as you get a password after completing this level, as we have a boss fight once we make it to the very end of it. Here we have to deal with the merchant guy, wait for him to swing his sword, and then after he does so, you can land on his head in order to actually damage him. After you land on him, he'll then go into kind of a spree of just swinging the sword wildly everywhere. When he does this, you obviously aren't going to be able to land on him to do damage, so just wait for that to play out, then do a regular swing, and then land on him again to hit him. Just rinse and repeat until he's done, and we're moving on to stage 2. At the end of a stage, you'll get your password so that you can continue. It's pretty much the same exact password system as the SNES one, though I don't know if they're the same codes or not. Either way, we're now in the Cave of Wonders, and as soon as you start off this level, you're going to be swinging from the stalactites in the ceiling, and when you do so, they do fall. If they fall and like you ended up going backwards or something, you can actually land on them when they're on the ground or, you know, stuck in the ground, and use them then to spring your way over. There's some bats and scorpions, including like right here, you have to wait for the scorpion to kind of go down a little bit so that you can safely grab a hold of the ledge and pull yourself up. There's a couple of ledges like that. Here, you have a bunch of like pieces of a bridge that will fall apart when you run across them, so be careful and quick on it before doing a whole bunch more springing across the stalactites. When you make it down to like the treasure room, you'll have a couple of skeleton-like soldiers down here who will swing their sword at you when you get close. Wait for them to swing, jump on them in order to kind of catapult your way over, and at the end of the room is the exit to the next part. In the next area, you're going to have to ride on this log as it slowly moves through the water, landing on a couple of bats along the path. It's a little bit slow moving, but always be ready to jump up if need be, but especially near the end of it where you're going to have to grab onto a switch and pull it in order to activate a door in order to continue. While it's unnecessary, you can jump up here if you like in order to grab a couple of items and such, just maybe waste a few moments of time, watch out for a couple of bats, but make sure that you're able to get back on the log before it ends up passing by. Here we're going to do the same, just jumping up to these platforms and waiting for the log to kind of go past, and then right after this is where we have to grab this rope in order to activate the switch that pulls up that door where then we can kind of go underneath of it. But you have to be very quick about that, because obviously if you don't pull it up high enough, the door will quickly slam down and you'll end up falling into the water, or if you hang on for too long, you'll end up missing the log and drop down into the water that way. Right up here, we have a couple of openings that rocks drop down from. Try to get around the rocks, but you don't have a whole lot of opening after the rock falls in order to get past. But if you're quick enough, you may only take one hit or be able to get by safely before getting to the end and completing Stage 2. Now, Stage 3 is escaping the Cave of Wonders after the lamp has been found. And the first part of this is an auto-scrolling level where your goal, of course, is to make sure you don't fall down into the lava. This is, of course, a slower-paced stage because it's auto-scrolling, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to kind of keep up the pace and be able to make it over things safely. Just always know what's ahead of you. Like, if the screen hasn't quite scrolled enough and you don't know where the next platform is, it's best just to wait until the platform is fully on screen before you attempt the jump. You'll always have enough time in order to do that. Right here, wait a few moments for this rock to come out of the lava, and you'll be able to use that to spring up to the platform up here, and then grab onto the thing in the ceiling and swing your way across a couple of gaps. Another thing that's not too bad with this game is the music. A lot of the renditions of the songs they actually are using in here are done pretty well. In fact, I think there's more music in this than the actual licensed official Aladdin game on NES. With how slowly the screen ends up moving a lot of times, it's a bunch of waiting in this stage for it to finally move enough so we can actually do a bit more platforming. Watching out for this fireball, I hit this pot sitting here, which frees a golden scarab, which if you do collect, will take you at the end of a level to the genie wheel of fortune, basically, which you can net yourself some extra lives and bonuses and such. After making up a couple of pillars over to this platform, wait a few moments, and you will have another one of these rocks spewed up into the air, which will allow you to reach the stalactite there, which will flip you on safely to this platform. Wait for a few moments for the rock to kind of get up, and by the time it does, you'll actually be able to see the pillar on the next side, and then repeat the process going between the rock and the pillar, and do this a few times in a row. Eventually, you will land on solid ground, and once you do, you will hit the exit, and we can move on to the next part of the level. Now, this is what's kind of weird about this game in general, is you have the flying carpet segment where you have to escape the Cave of Wonders while it's falling apart. The thing is, in this bootleg, they use the same sprite for the Aladdin Jasmine bonus level for the escape. So somehow Jasmine is with us on the magic carpet. Aladdin's in his alternate outfit, his Prince Ali-like outfit, and you slowly get to kind of make your way flying, watching out for the walls and the rocks that are falling down. It's a pretty easy escape level, easier than its SNES counterpart, a lot of which is I just stay kind of back towards the left side of the screen, and this allows me to do pretty good maneuverability, knowing what's coming next, and watch out for most rocks. Once you make it to this long corridor, the level is over, and you'll get the password and move on to Stage 4. Now, Stage 4 is inside the Genie's Lamp, which is one of my favorite areas in the SNES version of the game, because it has some really cool platforming areas, and I love speedrunning this. In the SNES version, I speedran it for a little bit of time, nowhere near world record, but this part was always the funnest to kind of go through. A lot of very quick moves, climbing up on things, and then flipping off of others, and trying to see how quickly and like how much you can just barely land on that next platform as you're going through. Sometimes you do have to wait a little bit, like right here we have to wait for these clouds in order for them to appear so that we can then make it over to the balloon rings and use those to kind of flip our way between the clouds. After that whole segment, you'll have a bunch of the floating pots in the air with wings, one of the weirdest enemies for sure, and then we're near the end of the first part of the Inside the Genie's Lamp. The second part has a brighter sky to it and starts off with a bunch of balloons that slowly move up from the ground. You have to wait for them to come up enough so you can actually spring off of them in order to reach platforms. Do that again here. Be sure to kind of just avoid the balloon on that spot. You can just kind of jump instantly to the hook to flip over. Then you'll have a couple of these pillars that are kind of there where you'll be able to hit them and flip and keep doing that to land safely on platforms right afterwards. When you make it here, you'll have a tornado chasing you for a little bit of time, and a couple of these end up spawning from below. And if you're moving quickly enough, though, you should be able to outrun the tornadoes and make it to the end of this part. As we continue on to the next level here, we change up the background a little bit again. Now we have these blocks that fall once you land on them for a little bit of time. You have to do a lot of this where you land on one, wait for it to start to fall, and then you're able to kind of maneuver, either fall on or jump to the next platform and get there safely. While the things are falling, they don't fall super fast, so you usually have a good enough time to react and be able to kind of get past safely. Here, wait for it to fall and jump to the platform next to it, and do the same right here. You can either kind of jump off or just run off, and you'll be able to land on there perfectly fine. The next part has these annoying springs. The game kind of glitches out a little bit here with so much going on, which is a bit annoying, but usually with just, you know, a little bit of maneuvering and patience, I can still kind of see what I'm doing and be able to get through it. Making it to the end of this part, though, is the end of Inside of the Genie's Lamp, and now we're moving on to Stage 5, which is inside of the pyramid. Start off this level by jumping up a couple of rocks and take the giant Cobra statues, and this will allow you to bypass a little bit of the sand. The sand is always pushing and pulling you in one way or another while you're in it, so a lot of times we're going to be very careful while moving through. You don't want to kind of go too fast and have the sand push you momentum-wise right into a pit. Here we have a series of little platforms and a bat waiting for us, but right there at the end of that is the sign to move on to part 2 of the Inside the Pyramid. Here we have a couple of pillars trying to crush us near the very beginning. Wait for, of course, them to open before trying to trek on through. Over here, climb up like the staircase of sand and make it up here where you'll have these Cobra Switches that when you land on a couple of them, they like start moving upwards and downwards. Some of them rotate in a circle, and you just need to use these so that you can keep making it over to the next part of the platforms. The enemy that you have to deal with a lot during these segments, the guard that throws out his sword like a boomerang, are a bit annoying. You don't have a lot of time from when they throw out their sword to be able to quickly kind of get up and hit them. That's why apples will definitely come in handy in order to kind of hit those guys, stun them, and then be able to continue on. At the end of that part, though, is the end of Stage 5, and then we move on to the bonus level. Now, this is just a very casual level. We now have the correct sprite of Aladdin and Jasmine together, as you're supposed to have here. And basically all this level is for you to kind of fly and maneuver around and collect gems. You don't even need to collect the gems or anything like that. It's purely a bonus stage, which I always hate it when I was doing speedruns because you just have to kind of wait for this level to play out. The only way you can kind of speed it up at all is kind of like sit near the very front of the screen so that as soon as you make it to the end, you'll instantly finish. But outside of doing that, there was no like other tactics to move this level along a bit. But it was pretty well done and kind of a cool thing to see. The Sega Genesis version didn't have like a counterpart to this. Instead, a whole new world was used for the game's ending that you end up getting once you beat the game, instead of having it like here where it would kind of fall in place as far as the plot's concerned, except there was no inside the pyramid part of the movie, which is kind of weird. The level thankfully isn't too extremely long though, and now we're inside of Jafar's palace, which is the final stage of the game, but not the final part of the game here. You have a whole bunch of Iagos that spawn and drop skulls that you can then bounce off of if you're able to jump on them while they're falling or just dropping them. You'll have a series of platforms that move pretty slowly, but you can see kind of the trek of where they're going, so you can kind of figure out if you'll be able to make certain jumps. You have plenty of the boomerang-throwing sword guys, so be very careful of them. Have apples ready, if possible, in order to hit these guys. One thing that's a bit annoying in the game is that your health doesn't replenish at the end of levels, and because of this, I'm pretty low on health, but there is some food throughout the course of the game, like right here, I'm able to get one of the chickens, which completely refills my health all the way back up to full. Here, with this platform, I have to kind of wait for it to slowly maneuver around. It's going to go all the way around the track, but eventually it will then pass the spikes over to the right. You don't want to accidentally jump there and land on the spikes and end up getting knocked back into the pit below. But right after that, though, is the end of this part of the stage. But now here we are at the final part of the game, the battle against Jafar. You have one like pot kind of waiting for you there, but once you go to the right, the screen will auto-scroll, and then the Jafar battle begins. Jafar will swoop on down, allowing you to hit him. He'll then summon lightning that will hit at 3 specific spots every single time he ends up summoning the lightning. So it's very easy to dodge. He only summons it in the center, to the right, to the left, but not against the walls. So as long as you're like really far left or really far right, you'll miss the lightning every time he ends up doing it. He'll then end up spawning a bunch of the winged pots that appear, and you can kind of like bounce off of those pots and just kind of wait. Once all the pots are gone, Jafar will respawn and allow you to usually then go into an attack against them. Sometimes he just appears and spawns more pots. Other times he will appear and then finally do the swoop motion, so you'll be able to jump on him. I don't know if I don't think it's random, but it seems like he'll do 2 sets of the pots and then finally do a swoop. After a while in the fight, usually, he will then kind of fly around the top portion of the screen, dropping his staff down, in which case you can actually bounce off the staff and jump up at him. He'll once again summon some lightning, disappear, and then go right back into the whole summoning flying pots thing, eventually respawning and allowing us to jump on his head once again. Now, for final bosses is pretty easy. They don't actually have the second form of Jafar in this version. It's funny that both the licensed NES version and this bootleg, neither one of them actually have the final version of Jafar that you fight in their Genesis and Super Nintendo counterparts. But once you deliver the final hit to this form of Jafar, the game is over, and you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Aladdin. Well, the Aladdin bootleg for NES. One last little kind of touch with the bootleg here is that they do an okay job kind of recreating the ending. It's very simplistic, just like it is on the SNES, where you have Aladdin and Jasmine. They kind of ride off in Agrabah at night. It's actually pretty nicely done graphic-wise overall, and sums up that this isn't a bad bootleg. Like, one of those few and far bootlegs out there that's actually kind of well made and a bit fun. It has a couple of problems, like I said, with momentum and a little bit of glitching sprite, like flickering and stuff that we saw in a few levels, but overall, pretty fun game and much, much more enjoyable to play than the licensed Aladdin. But with the end in the sky, that will wrap up this episode of Play It Through.